This is Drew Rouget Chapman with the Cartoonist Rights Network International. I'm talking via Skype with Dan Murphy, the editorial cartoonist at the Vancouver province. Dan, thanks for speaking with me, and I understand you've had a little controversy recently. Before I ask you about the controversy, can you describe the animated parody that you created a company took offense to?
I can. The company is Enbridge, and they make pipelines for oil. And there's a project that they're pushing very heavily in British Columbia for a pipeline that will bring oil from the Alberta tar sands over the Rocky Mountains to a port on the west coast of Canada, where it'll be put into oil tankers taken to China for refining. So that's what they want to do. And they've come out with this advertisement for television, and it's kind of a hallmark card to oil pipelines. It is very pastel, and it's I think got singing birds in it. It's a beautiful thing to look at. And representing the pipeline, they've got this kind of butterflying ribbon, over the landscape. And I can understand that they love this ad. It's a beautiful ad, but it's about something that could change the province radically, and it's about something that a lot of people, including First Nations, are opposing, because the danger from a pipeline crossing, hundreds of salmon spawning grounds and the Rocky Mountains, and then going to the coast, and then being put into tankers, which are going to travel the coast. And there's a lot of opposition to the company. But anyway, they've announced a $5 million campaign to promote the pipeline, and it hasn't officially been okayed yet, although our federal government shows every inclination of okaying it. Anyway, they came out. Enbridge came up with a beautiful animated ad promoting their pipeline from Alberta to BC. And what I did is I took their ad and I added a narrator, and I splashed their ad with oil at different times, and then had a hand come over and squeegee that oil off. Enbridge has a history of pipeline problems. I think there was a large one down in the U.S., Kalamazoo River in Michigan. There was a bad oil spill just recently. So anyway, so that's it. They come up with this great ad. It's a beautiful ad, and I splattered it with oil in a parody, and that was posted on the newspaper's website.
And you mentioned that one of the groups that's opposed is the First Nations. And for those of our audience who are not Americans, could you explain who they are?
Well, they would be in the U.S. Described as Native Americans. They're Aboriginals. They're the indigenous people, the people who were here before, Leif Erikson. And there are 50 different First Nations opposed to this pipeline. 50 First Nations through whose territory, whose traditional territory this pipeline is slated to run.
And how did you learn that Enbridge had an issue with the parody?
I was called into a meeting by the editor-in-chief, and along with the editorial page editor, he told us that the headquarters, my newspaper's headquarters, Post Media headquarters, and Enbridge were demanding it come down. If it didn't come down, the editor-in-chief would lose his job. That was it had been maybe 4 hours when we had this meeting.
And I understand there were actually 2 meetings. Is that right?
There was a post-mortem too. Once it was taken down, once the video was taken down, we had a meeting, kind of like what just happened meeting.
And why did you decide to go public with what happened or what was said to you in those meetings and the fact that your parody was taken down?
Well, because there was a fundamental breakdown in that divide between advertising and the news side. You know, there's that wall. And this was just a red flag moment. And I think everybody at that first meeting knew that this was a red flag moment. If advertising can influence the news side, then, you know, it stops being a newspaper, really, and it stops deserving the support and the faith of its readership. And readers are very quick. I mean, we had people, before I went public, we had people, you know, putting two and two together. It's up, it's down. Enbridge is an advertiser in these papers. There's a connection. And, you know, sometimes people see connections where there aren't. But they see them where there are, too. And this was one of those instances.
Now, Enbridge claims that no threats were made and that they did not demand that the animation be removed. But an Enbridge spokesman did admit that they had spoken with the publisher and had received an apology. But does any of that even matter?
No, because, I mean, I can only say what I heard in that meeting, right? So this was from editor-in-chief. We got word that headquarters Enbridge were demanding it be taken down. If not, we were going to lose their advertising. So this was all secondhand to me, right? And Enbridge never got in touch with me. Headquarters never got in touch with me. But yeah, that's all really beside the point. The newspaper blinked. The idea that our publisher gave an apology to an advertiser over what is fair comment and what is recognized as, you know, the purview of parody, to use a company's material to mess with it and turn it back on the company is disheartening and unfortunate.
So what do you make of the claim that the parody was pulled because of potential copyright infringement?
We, at this second meeting, the post-mortem, this came up. It was probably mentioned in the first meeting, but that they were especially upset because we had taken their material and messed with it. The second meeting, that became more of a focus, and I pointed out that we had done the exact same thing with other advertisers on our website. We'd done the thing in the last federal election with all three major parties. We'd done the same thing with the province was running ads to promote a new tax of theirs. And we had taken bits of those ads and rejiggered them and put them back on the website. And the website was carrying the official ads as well as the parody of the ads. So we'd done it. We'd done it before. There was no problem before. There was, nobody talking copyright before. And so this was, an out, an excuse. They were in a difficult position, and they were now using that as the excuse, which apparently has become their major excuse now, their major explanation of it. But the argument for pulling it, the reasons for pulling it at that first meeting were that Enbridge was going to yank the money according to headquarters, according to the editor-in-chief, if it wasn't pulled.
And the cartoon is still, to this day, not available on the website, correct?
That's correct.
Well, we obviously contacted you because, as you mentioned, there's a concern here about potential corporate interference in editorial decision making, which is very disturbing. But given how things have apparently worked out, are you surprised by the the reaction by your readers to come to your defense, and were you surprised by your paper's reaction in the beginning?
That's what surprised me.
What surprised you the most out of this whole crazy incident?
That I haven't gotten laid out of it. But and I think there's kind of a timeline whereby diminishing returns as far as that goes. What surprised me most was the initial call, was the initial decision, was that initial meeting where the editor-in-chief was the fact that his job was on the line. He had been told, according to him, that if he didn't pull it, he was going to get fired. A direct quote is from that meeting is, "I'm not going to get fired over a fart joke," because there's a sound effect in my parody that is that. That's the position he was put in, and his decision surprised me the most in this, because I think he's always been very supportive of my cartoons and supportive of my web stuff, and by the level of his unease at this point, at the ultimatum that had been laid on him, I know that my gut tells me that he knew it was a lousy decision. He knew that the wall was coming down and it shouldn't come down. He wasn't going to be fired over fart jokes, which tells me also that he like most people in his position, probably fantasized about a Ben Bradley moment, about when he could, take the high road against, the upper echelon of government trying to, squelch the rights of a newspaper. The problem is his Ben Bradley moment came with a cartoon with a fart joke, and he didn't respond as he very well likely wishes he had, And part of it, I think, is bluff calling, too. I think that if headquarters had called Enbridge's bluff, I think if he had called headquarters bluff, that either bluffs would have been called or consequences would have been paid, but they would have been, if consequences had been paid for standing up for your newspaper and for standing up for the rights of your newspaper's columnists or cartoonists to have points of view, then those consequences should be paid. If you're going to lose your job, there's points in your career where it's more worth losing your job than keeping your job. And, so he might have gotten laid out of it.
I don't know whether to include late or not, but will you be continuing to take on this company?
Yeah, and have done in the past, which is another way that this particular instance kind of, stands out. And I think the threat about yanking the ad dollars is the reason this stands out, is the reason that this is different than previous times. Because I've done Enbridge before, I've had their logo in animations before, and been supported by the paper and by the editor-in-chief in doing this. Never had a problem before. Nobody's ever said, could you lay off of them? I'll continue to take on Enbridge. I don't think anybody there would want me not to. Take on Enbridge is too that sounds too self-aggrandizing. I'll keep doing, bad drawings in which Enbridge is referred to. Okay? Okay? Nobody said not to. And so far as I know, I'll still do web stuff, and at times Enbridge will be the topic of that because, as I said, that is one of the big topics province-wide right now. And it could, if they put in this pipeline, it's going to affect the reality of this province, the reality of the people in it. And, even if there aren't pipeline spills or tankers going up on the rocks, it's going to change our reality. So it's a big issue. newspaper certainly deals with big issues. They certainly want their editorial cartoonists to deal with the big issues, the issues that are on people's minds. So yeah, absolutely.
How did you feel about the readers' response?
Um, you know, the support from the readers and from the ACEC and from you folks and from people in the newsroom was quite extraordinary, as well from the people who wanted to interview me. Everybody understood that something that shouldn't have happened had happened, and everybody supported my talking about it. So it was not something, because I had no idea, like I probably mentioned to you, I was sure, I was like 90% sure, 95% sure. I told my daughter that I was going to be canned, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I wasn't thinking about what sort of support I'm going to get. I couldn't live without speaking out, because there's worse things than getting canned. And my daughter, had she found out that I didn't speak on the record about what had happened, she would have disowned me, right? So getting canned next to being disowned by my daughter, that was an easy one, right? I didn't think far enough to think, well, what's the support going to be? And then when it came, I was grateful, and I shouldn't have been amazed by it, but I hadn't even been thinking about it, right? So when you guys got in touch, when the ACEC did their petition, when readers started supporting me, and journalism professors and all this stuff, it was like, whoa, that's pretty neat. That's what we're supposed to do. But I didn't. I was surprised, because I hadn't even thought about that part of it, right?
Well, we're amazed that you dared to go public, and actually, stood up for this principle of editorial freedom from corporate interference. So, congratulations for doing that.
One thing, if I just can, and I'm keeping you too long, about that, I found, there have been people who have emailed and said that it was praiseworthy what I did, right? But that really worries me. This was about basics. If something like basics is praiseworthy, that's worrisome. That should be worrisome, right? It should be about, of course you did that. And like I say, I can think of people in my newsroom, the majority of whom would see no other alternative, right? And probably the editor-in-chief on a better day might have, and if he thought that down the line I could have been, played in a movie by Robert Redford, he might have called it differently, right? But the idea that praiseworthy, that scares me, right? Because it shouldn't be that. That should be the bottom line. This was about a bottom line. It wasn't about anything but a bottom line, and that shouldn't be praiseworthy. That should be expected, right? So
well,
if anybody emailed me, they should say, "Thanks, you did what we expected," and that I could deal with that a lot more and with a lot less concern than something about basics being seen as praiseworthy, right? Because that scares me. If we're to that state, if we're there, that means we've already lost too much.
Well, I could still see many people taking the path of least resistance and just not saying anything and working another day, not risking getting fired.
Yeah, but you'd kind of lose a part of yourself if you did that. I think most people, who are self-aware would lose a bit of themselves, and if they have to face the wrath of a kid or a partner, who has their head on straight, right?
Well, thanks for doing what you feel is expected and living up to your daughter's ideals. And thank you for your time.
Thank you so much, Drew. Very nice talking to you, and thanks for all your support, man.